The topic of this week is debugging. Now, naturally, debugging would come after testing, but it is also a natural part of the development process. So when you get to test in order to find issues, you would get the debug in order to fix the issues. But even if you're not creating test cases, you're just during the development process, you would face issues like the behavior of that you expect is not what you see. So you would need to debug in order to fix it. So debugging and development go hand in hand, or we can say that the debugging is essential part of the development process, even if you're not officially creating test cases. So every IDE would naturally have debugging features or debugging tools, or what we call a debugger. And Visual Studio is the IDE that we're using in integration with Unity. So we want to use that feature there with Unity. So for that, you would need the workflow that is called game development with Unity, installed with a Visual Studio, which would be the case if you installed Visual Studio through Unity Hub. So the default is that it would be installed, but just in case it is not, you can always open the Visual Studio installer and modify the version you have integrated with Unity, and make sure that the workload that is related to game development with Unity is checked, and then install while downloading. Or install if it's downloaded. I mean, install it. Okay? By default, it should be installed already, but just in case it wasn't, you know how other steps in order to get it. Okay, so this is the game the treasure hunting game that we had before. Okay, and now let's say we want to debug it. So first we need to open the script that we have. So let's say somehow the behavior of the treasure box is not as we expected. So we want to examine it in order to fix the problem. So first we need to open it in Visual Studio. All right. Now, if you remember when we worked with Visual Studio before we start working with Unity, we always use this play button that is not attached to the debugger, right? So this run without debugging, right? That's because running with debugging slows down the performance a little bit. So without Unity, this button would have used to be called run with debugging, right? Or debug or something attached, debugging attached or something like that. So it's the same button, but now because this is attached to Unity, we need to, the script runs on Unity, we need to attach the debugger with Unity in order to execute it. Okay, so when we do that, if we click on this button here and we go to Unity, it will give us a warning saying that attaching the debugger slows down the performance significantly. And this is true with the normal C# code. It is especially true with Unity because it requires some serious computation resources. So now attaching debugger slows down the performance. But it is necessary. Sometimes we can't just say, okay, it slows down, so we ignore it. It is necessary. We're gonna have to use it, but we don't have to use it all the time. So we can, if we click on enable for the debugging session, we're just gonna, it will be enabled for one session only. And if we need to debug again, we're gonna need to attach it again. Okay, so that you don't have to suffer with the slowness when you don't really need to debug. Okay, so if I click on enable debugging for this session, it should allow it for this one session only. Okay, and every time I try to execute it, I will need to attach it in order to avoid the slowness of the attaching the debugger. So now let's say the collision event, something wrong with it, and I want to examine it. Okay, now some people try to look into the code, try to read it, and try to figure out what the problem is by reading the code. And that's sometimes okay, sometimes helpful. Most of the time, it's not helpful. Okay, what's really helpful is that you need to pause the code where as close to the problem as possible and then examine it there. So how do I pause the code while it's running? I can put a breakpoint here. So if I click on the sidebar here, beside now I put a breakpoint at line 37. Okay, almost every editor give you the chance to put a breakpoint. Sometimes you click on the line number itself. Almost every editor has this feature. It's not specific to Visual Studio. Okay, so now I'm asking the program, when you reach this point, pause. So you don't stop the program, it's still running. It just paused so that I can examine its internal status and trying to figure out what the problem is. Okay, now how do I run it? So if this is the Unity, so I play the game. Now if the breakpoint, if the program didn't pause at the breakpoint, it's either that this line was not executed to begin with, or the debugger was not attached. Okay, now here it stopped, as you can see. It's now pausing at this line before it is executed. Okay, now let me show you how it looks like. Sometimes you would have an if statement and the condition is false. Like you would have some real condition. Okay, and then something debug. It's gonna tell me this is unreachable. I want you to see how does it look like so that when you experience it, you recognize it. So I'm just gonna log a statement. Line not executed. And this is not gonna be printed. Now we see this warning because I said if false. This is unreachable code. But okay, let me just say this speed more than 200, which will never happen. Okay. Now, if I put a breakpoint here, this line is not executed, will not be executed. Now let me try. I'm gonna attach again, and then run the game. So it seems like it's running normally. There's nothing happened, no pausing. So first thing you think about, this condition was not met, so this line was not executed. Okay, so that may give you a hint. Might be like if the condition is not that obvious, might give you a hint why the problem happened. Maybe you expect this line of code to be executed, but it didn't. So you need to examine the condition and fix it. Okay. Okay. Just also to experience some of the features when we run the debug mode, I'm gonna create a function. Change status. And it takes a string message. And in that function, I am going to take these two lines, the line that changes the status of text. If you remember, this is the code, like this is the code that you added in the lab. So I'm gonna, instead of repeating the lines, I'm gonna put them in a function. And here, I'm gonna call this function with the message I want to change the status to. Here it is that. So that's also a good design because we don't want to repeat ourselves, right? So we can refactor these two lines of code that repeated in the two branches. And then I just refactored them into a function so that I don't have to repeat the code. Okay. So now I am going to put a breakpoint here at line 42. And now let's see if we're gonna hit it. So I'm gonna restart the game. Okay, so we did hit the breakpoint, and now we can see that the editor itself, the IDE, is in debug mode. Now you can see here some things has changed. Now you can see this button now says continue. So if I just wanna, okay, I just wanna have a quick look and I wanna run the program until ending or until a new breakpoint is hit, I can run continue. So let's say, for example, I have another breakpoint here. If I say continue, if I don't have any breakpoint, it will continue until the end. If I do, then it will continue until it hits the new breakpoint. Okay? Oh, now if I continue again, there is no other breakpoint, so it will continue, resume until ending. All right.